open session to order, and just a reminder that we're being recorded. So just a change to the agenda. Bill Edwards was to be here, but we thought we might run late in our closed session, so he's going to come next month for the presentation of the plaque. So item number 2 is on page 74 of our big packet. And so it's the minutes from March 10th. So that was our last open session, full open session that we had up until this point. So if I can get a motion to approve the minutes. Okay, Jennifer, and second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right. And then item number 3 is the adoption of the agenda. So just with that one change at the beginning. Can I get a motion to adopt our agenda? Jennifer? And second? John? And all in favor? Okay, and okay, so disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there anyone who has a conflict of interest? I'm now going to ask that.
Does that mean I can go home now?
Yeah, no, we are having this meeting. Any members with a conflict of interest? Okay, none indicated. All right, so item number 5.1, so that's on page 77 of our agenda packet. And so this is a letter from the Common Clerk's office. So this is just, they were asking for our legal fees, and we had sent those. So this is really just a receive and file, so motion to receive and file. Jennifer, and second?
Second.
John, and all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And item 5.2 is a letter from the Fundy Regional Service Commission. So this is the motion that they adopted on March 24th, that the Fundy Regional Service Commission no longer pursue the item of regional policing from their end. Okay, so this is a receive and file. Okay, Jennifer, and second? Brian, and all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and item 5.3 is an invitation to the DARE graduation. And so I think we all received this. This is next Wednesday, June 10th. So I will be there, and you'll be there, obviously. You'll be there. You will? Okay.
I'll be back, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it then back to work.
Okay, so we've got some here and...
Yeah.
3 or 4 of us.
Yes, 3 or 4 of us, exactly. It's like 7, pretty good numbers.
Yeah.
All right, my grade 5 daughter will be in that, which is quite exciting. Okay, so this is a receive and file. Okay, motion to receive and file. Jennifer, second. Brian. Okay, all in favor? Okay, and so we don't have any presentations, no committee reports, nothing separate from the consent agenda. So now we're on to 9.1, the internal monthly report on page 80. That's quite a stack of paper you got there.
Is this different than yours?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So for the month of May, 1 complaint, 4 complimentary correspondence, and 0 grievances.
Okay. Any questions about the internal monthly report? Okay. Can we receive and file that? No, that's just moving on. Receive and file? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, John. And second, all in favor? All right, and 9.2 is from the CAPG. So we received a request back in April, and this is in regards to a request for sponsorship of their annual conference. So any thoughts on providing sponsorship on the CAPG annual conference? That's a request of us, which would be money.
How much do we normally do this? And how much
We don't normally do this, no. So, yeah, my recommendation is that we don't, given our financial, yeah. Okay, so, okay, so the motion to, yeah.
I guess my question would
Right.
be, would we send them a letter thanking them for the invitation but declining to sponsor, or do we just not?
We haven't in the past.
Okay.
We
Good
didn't
enough.
provide any funding in 2013 or 14. And no letter of correspondence was sent, we just didn't receive.
Receive and file.
Yeah.
Someone.
Okay. All right, Jennifer, all in favor? Okay. Okay, and then we received an email, again, I think a couple of months ago, from Chris Waldschutz. And this was around giving out positive citations for citizens doing good deeds, basically. And so was there any background on this, Glenn? I think you had mentioned that.
Yes, we
this
have
has
done
been
this in the
before.
past with respect to community officers and others. We've done that crosswalks where we give pins out on a
Yeah.
number of occasions, and certainly anything that's good like this for positive is most certainly we could look at some other initiatives, but it's ongoing things.
Okay, any questions about that? Do we want to go
So
any
we
further?
have, or am I dreaming? Is there something with Dairy Queen things for kids wearing helmets?
Yep.
That was part
We
of it
did,
too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do this kind of thing, it's an ongoing, is it kind of looked at annually, or it's just kind of an ongoing?
Well, I wouldn't say that we looked at it
Mhm.
annually. We have done a number of things over the years, and
Right.
we'll certainly look at it again. Summer's coming. And
Okay.
maybe a good initiative, remind us about the Dairy Queen. We can
Yeah.
certainly look into that.
Okay,
So,
okay.
but
any
you don't
questions?
need a motion for that, Glenn?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So do I receive and file that?
Receive and file.
Receive and file, okay, everything's
moved.
received and filed,
Second.
Jennifer, all in favor? All right,
All in favor?
okay. We all have our rules down, we're doing it for. Okay. Item 9.4, so this is a call for nominations to the Board of Directors. So as you know, Jonathan Franklin was a member of the board, and then when he stepped down, I took his position on an interim basis. So this is really an annual call for nominations. It has to be, if we want to have somebody on the CAPG, I think there is a cost to it, and we talked about it last year, but it's quite minimal, I think, to be part of the CAPG. So the benefit, I guess, and I've only been on one call up to this point, but the benefit is really to be tied in with kind of a more intimate group. I think the meetings are every 2 months. There was an opportunity back in April to be part of what they call lobby days, so to go to Ottawa and be part of that discussion. I wasn't able to go to that. There's the CAPG conference, which is kind of something separate, and we get to do that as members. And then there's an annual planning retreat for the board, which again just gives an opportunity to network and kind of get connected with best practices and what other police services are doing. So, so I guess it's a discussion. Do we want to have somebody from? There's nobody else in New Brunswick, I don't think, who's a CAPG member. I don't think there are any other police services.
Well, Madam Chair, I thought when I looked at this, that
Yeah.
there's three vacancies, one in British Columbia, Alberta, and
Mhm.
Manitoba, so we wouldn't,
We have to nominate because I'm only interim for this year, filling
we gotta do
Jonathan's
that
seat.
now.
So we would have to do this and fill this out and sign it and send it back. If we want to have somebody, it doesn't need to be me, it can be anybody who's interested, and we would send that nomination, and then it's up to the board, the CAPG board. They go through their nominations, and, you know, there could be someone else from New Brunswick who's being nominated, but,
yeah, we don't know them.
no, we don't.
Well, I mean, I would just assume see you stay on,
Mhm.
you know, you're new to this, and
Yeah.
to keep changing it wouldn't be, I don't think.
Because it does take time with what I'm just kind of getting into it and just learning, so I wouldn't say that I've added any value or gotten all the time up to this point, but if there's another year, then there could be some value there.
So could I recommend then that we put your name forward as a nomination from the City of St. John?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Second.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Uh,
Okay, and then, so we will fill this paperwork out after. I think we need a couple of signatures on this, so we'll do that, and then we can get this sent in. I think the deadline is next week,
June the 5th.
Friday, so we'll do that right away,
Okay.
before we leave tonight, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get that done. Okay, so where are we now? So that was item 9.5. So this is our overtime on page 88. So this is our report on overtime and court time costs. So are you going to walk us through this one?
You wanna
Or
go through
Marvin?
that? Marvin's
Okay, sure,
better-
yep. Yep.
Unfortunately, we're playing catch-up because I
Yep.
did say we bring this in monthly. This report actually reflects up to April 2015. And what we're trying to capture in this sort of format is give you a month at a glance and a year-to-date at a glance, where we're going for the year. And for the month of April, the total overtime that we incurred, the budget was $32,000. We incurred $52,000 in overtime, which is a difference of just over $20,000 over budget. And then if you reduce some of the extra duty revenue we received, for the month of April, we were about $24,000 over budget. One of the things we did when we went through the analysis and looked at April, for instance, is the way our system's set up is I can earn overtime in December and actually have it paid out in April. You can carry it. So that's one of the things we're dealing with now is how much it was in actual April overtime versus how much was paid in April. So if we look at that number there, the $24,000 we're over budget, I would suggest to you probably at least most of it was paid out with respect to the previous year. Because you have up to 6 months to pay the
Yeah, we had this issue back, in last year's budget when we were trying to understand, and it was so confusing. And so I'm wondering, and I don't know if I can put a motion in if needed, but I'm thinking a more effective way to really get a handle on what our overtime hours are, if we can track monthly the number of hours earned for both courts, so the hours, and then what's the associated cost to that, because we need to understand the financial implications as well. But I think what I'd like to understand is how are we managing our overtime hours monthly, and so then we get a better kind of understanding of truly where we are. So I mean, it's so confusing, and we can get dinged with a big budget number in any given month. But if we can, and I would suggest that we need to have our budget should say our monthly budgeted hours. And so we understand how many hours are we budgeting and how many hours have we actually accrued. So are we spending? And then we're still going to have to spend and pay out from previous budgets, but hopefully this will help us to get a better handle on what are the overtime hours and how do we manage those month to month. And that's where we would look to you to kind of say, how do we manage those hours and what's our target and how much are we over target by month?
That's the direction the board wants to go. That makes it easier for us.
Yeah.
The only thing I would, I guess, not so much caution the board on is that at the end of the year when we report our actual overtime expense.
We still need to have both. So I would say this is in addition to the financial implications as well.
Okay.
I'm just adding work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. But no longer-
Just to be clear.
So you want this, but you want us to show the actual hours?
Because we need to understand where we are financially, but I think on an ongoing basis, if we can start to track and manage our overtime hours and kind of operationally, how do we track and manage the overtime hours, then we are really kind of comparing apples to apples. Because the other thing that when we look over 5 years ago, our budget, like the numbers aren't really telling us the true story of is our overtime, our overtime hours going up, down, or staying the same, and how are we managing those, and what's kind of because typically overtime is a symptom of something else, so what else is going on, right?
And obviously the pay in 5 years has increased substantially.
Exactly, right? So the numbers we're not comparing
And I think
apples to
at one
apples.
point, one of the meetings I
Yeah.
did suggest the
Yeah.
hours. So what if we?
It was your idea.
Well, I wouldn't
That's
say
where I
my
got
idea,
it.
But what if we presented this report
Yeah.
each month? And
Yeah.
why don't I give you a report called overtime utilization?
Right, that would be
Because you really
good.
look at the utilization of your hours.
Yes.
How are we using those hours?
Yes.
And I can certainly take the budget
And
extrapolate
change that, right,
hours.
what are the hours,
Yeah.
exactly.
So more like if you look at a manufacturing.
Yes.
You're looking at capacity and what are your
Yeah.
hours or man hours. So yeah,
Right.
let me do that.
Yeah,
And for
good.
the month of May, I'll come back and
Perfect.
give you this document, plus we'll show the utilization
Yeah,
of our.
does that make sense to you guys?
Is it contractual? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is it the contractual thing or collective agreement thing that you're able to carry this overtime?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
Yes. What makes it more difficult is sometimes there's more prevalent cases, more officers called, so you have to be careful even comparing hours to hours, but
Mhm.
overall. in
But what's the
general-
at least then we
Right.
can say,
Yeah.
there's a variance in the number of hours, and here's where that's coming from,
For-
rather than there's a variance in how much we've spent, but we don't really have a clear picture of,
Well,
is that
if-
from 6 months ago, or is that from, like, we don't know where that's.
And we're gonna get mired in the
Oh,
same mess that
ex-
we were in
last
last
year,
year. if we
exactly.
don't
You're,
get
you're
started.
correct, because for example, CID was about $10,000 overtime.
Yeah.
And it says 21 because the number of people were paid out significant amount of money because it built up
Yeah.
in,
We-
somewhere
we'll
100
get
hours.
some-
Yeah.
That's where I think this is really gonna help us out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is, you have X number of hours per month,
Yeah,
and when the hours are gone, you might not have paid for them, but you're gonna be paying for them, then you can say.
right,
"This
we
is where
expect
paid
this
for
in
those
6
hours,"
months, yeah.
right?
Yeah, but can we present that in 2 reports?
Yes.
Because I want the utilization to be separate,
Yes,
as far as where are the hours going and what are we using them for?
Yeah.
And then the cost will be the cost, because I
yeah,
want to make sure.
but then over time, we should be able to see, right? So if we say, we were only supposed to, according to our budget, we have, 100 hours of overtime that we would expect, but we've used 200, so we expect that in 6 months, we're gonna end up paying for that. So when the report comes out in 6 months or 5 months or 4 months, we know that's coming, and that's the part that, for me, it's really difficult, and then when we go back and try to explain this, I can't explain it, because I
Well-
don't have all of the information.
You're correct. And the other part of it is historically, we've really under budgeted for years up until the
Yes.
last year or two. Marvin's changed the budget. I think patrol for years was 98,000 or something
Right,
of that
so let's
nature.
get real
Right,
about
so-
what our budgeted
Right.
hours are,
Yeah.
and, or at least then we can say, this is our real utilization, month over month, and we have something that we can, then when we look at our budget for next year, we can say, here's what we used, and is there any way around that? What's contributing to that overtime? And is it because we're not budgeting appropriately and we need to have a discussion around our budget, or is it because of something else that we can manage differently?
Yeah, we've
But without
also-
that, we
Right.
can't even have a conversation, yeah.
We've also put additional oversight in terms
Yes.
of the inspectors for court with the Crown. and
Yes,
We were able to realize another savings of over 400 hours by
Perfect.
doing that.
yeah,
That's excellent.
yeah, and so if that can be included right in there,
Yeah.
right, and what are we doing, right, and
Yeah.
kind of,
So
that's,
that's a good news story,
Yeah.
that one.
To help me understand, what's the why? Would that be an article that somebody would want? Like why, what's
What?
the
I'm
benefit?
sorry?
Like, why would an individual want the ability to carry your overtime for 6 months before you
They
cash
use
it?
it for time off.
It can be time or money.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And the rule we
So
put in
I
place
do the
is,
work in December and I take it off in June?
Exactly.
Or I might want to save up for a vacation I'm going on. It
Okay.
could be a
No, I
variety
just
of
wanted to
reasons, right?
understand the why, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but our real issue was that we had to set a limit on how long you carry it.
Right.
yes,
And that's why 46 months is, everything that dated after 6 months, we paid it automatically, so that we try to minimize
This is a
that.
long time.
Now, how difficult would it be when you say like patrol services? Do patrol services crisscross with criminal investigations?
Yep.
Yes. We cannot,
You can't.
no, we can't separate, if I'm working patrol and I get called in, there's a homicide, they want me in CID for, say, a shift,
Yeah.
it'll be charged back to patrol. We're working on the internal system we have to try to track it.
Yeah. Okay.
And produce a report,
Yeah.
but we have limitations on the payroll system that we're using with the city, so we're trying to do a workaround by tracking the overtime by file.
Okay, what about the, I'm thinking like, from a professional experience that I've had at one time, trying to pinpoint where we are lacks, and like, let's say, for example, patrol services, we get a lot of overtime, but guess what? It's all sergeants because we don't have enough, or it's all
right,
patrol officers because we don't have enough. Like, can we identify where?
Yes.
like,
okay. So within that utilization report,
Well, we'll have some narrative to go with that
Right.
report, certain from.
and
the-
by, yeah, that's a good, yeah, by.
Because that way we can identify where the money's going to, and maybe we're better off just hiring somebody.
Right,
Well, patrol services is significant when, especially the summer impact because of the contract obligations. When we're down bodies, when we started it, our contract needs to be obviously revisited. But
Right.
we had 25 constables, 3 sergeants on a shift. Now we have 20, 21 constables, and 7 are allowed off, and there's minimum manning provisions. So in the summer, we're really hiring a lot of people, so at a cost.
Right.
But you got to weigh that all out with everything else.
But
So-
that will help us too, because if we say we can see the utilization in July and
Right.
August, we need to have that.
Yeah.
What we'll do
Can we
is-
do, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what we can do in the report, when we do the narrative, is for each month, we'll identify how many shifts were backfilled. meaning
Yeah.
that we had to hire
That's
someone.
what we
And
need.
that'll give you the number of hires, will tell you that, during that month, we were running short and we had to hire people for, we call
Are you
it.
able to include in there shifts that were short and you attempted and still ran short because you couldn't get anybody?
That usually doesn't happen because we have a minimum manning that we have to get people in.
So the bottom person would have to work.
Well, it might be the odd occasion where we don't get someone, but we gotta maintain those levels.
So if it did, could you?
Very seldom that happens.
Yeah.
Like,
There might be an occasion at 4 o'clock in the morning that we have
someone goes home
somebody
sick.
goes home sick, and by the time we call somebody to get them in here, then the next shift would be in.
And that's, obviously, you raise a good point, that's
Yeah.
another constraint we have, is we gotta maintain those levels,
Mhm.
which drives your overtime because.
Right, exactly.
So, but we certainly can identify the number
Yeah.
of times a patroller we had to hire, and
Yeah.
that will be reflected in the hours, of course, because
I can tell you last year it was probably around 325 more patrol services.
Shifts.
12-hour shifts.
Am I crazy or 6 months along, like 6 months, I don't work in an overtime environment, but to me, 6 times just to me is a recipe for always being mired in this constant,
Right.
no matter how we present these numbers, we're
We're-
mired in
yes.
this muck of overtime.
6 months, yeah.
See, again,
Is that in our policy or is that in their contract?
the contract.
Or maybe that's
Yeah,
standard,
so
I don't know, I don't work in an
Well,
environment.
that's,
where-
again, that's something, that's a conversation we can have when the contract opens up, is,
There's so
we
many.
pull that back a little bit.
Well, are we even
See-
keeping track of?
Yeah.
some of-
Yeah.
See, with the union I was in, you used it, we're getting paid out at the end of the year.
Yeah, so we need to
Couldn't
have
carry-
those
couldn't carry that.
discussions.
Well, ours is paid out within 6 months. There's no
Yeah, but I
period
know,
forward.
but if you have it in December, you could carry it over till.
Right, I get you. You
It's
mean
kind of
the
a-
year
So that's
end.
part of what we
The
need
The
to
year
look
end,
at.
yes, I
Okay.
understand what you're
Okay.
saying.
Somebody,
Yeah.
it's hard to manage.
So any other questions about the overtime? I think that'll help to kind
Yes,
of
and
open
the-
it up a little bit.
The
Yeah, and
deputy
then
chief already addressed the
right.
court time, we are taking steps with the
Yes,
town to
yes.
minimize the number of appearances, so.
That's huge, yeah. So then if we can see that and kind of
Yeah.
see year over year what those changes are and what's working, right? And put that right in the report, that would be helpful too.
Again, we're gonna have a very significant trial come up in September. that's
Yes,
gonna cost-
and we know that, so then if we kind of, that just opens up the conversation, right?
So
And
if we've got between now and September to fine tune this, you've already saved how many hours?
Well, the report I got was around 400 hours.
So we've already saved around 400 hours by this initiative.
Yeah.
And between now and September, if we fine tune it before that big trial comes, we stand to save a whole lot more
percentage-wise,
percent.
yeah.
Or at least be better standing and able
Yeah.
to better, more
At least
effectively.
we know we're
articulate
managing
what
it
we're
as
doing.
best we can.
No, but
Yeah,
that's
but
what
using
we
that
need to know.
process,
Right.
that's when it really counts, is in these big
Right.
You know, didn't we-
cases, right?
Didn't we talk about this a couple of meetings ago, that somebody had a system set up where you went to the court and there was a kiosk or somebody you could talk to? Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, that was a future mode of doing it.
Yes.
Where you would know beforehand
Yes,
that the judge would come out and.
We did that in the past.
okay.
We
Yeah.
did that in the past.
And that's what you wanted to do again. in the
And
future,
then, not gonna say the reasons why, but anyway, it didn't work well in terms of, not from our side, but,
Mhm.
and when somebody has to pay the final bill, then the other party's usually not too worried about it, right? And that's really what transpired, so. We, anyway, we're obviously trying to manage it better. We'll keep on that, and hopefully we realize some more results.
Excellent.
Good.
Receiving file?
Yeah, there's no other questions? No? Yep, receiving file?
So
That's your motion, okay, second, all in favor? Okay, okay, so item 9.6, so this was back Okay, so it's dated May, but it was, I think, put forward by Bill Reed. Do you have the background on this, Glenn?
Brian
On this,
can
Brian,
speak
okay,
to
great,
it.
perfect.
prepared for the April meeting.
Yes, that's what, okay, that's, I was like, I thought I saw this before in our package, but it says May. Okay, good. Okay,
Just simply to go and
Okay.
say the police administration data.
yeah,
So compare number of officers, jurisdiction officers. An important change in this one, and I'll just apply the other changes coming up as
Okay.
well, is that they no longer report by police service, but by CMAs. So in our case, that would be St. John Police Force, in our case, it's Regional Police, and a portion of the RCMP are police resources that are available in this jurisdiction. And it helps resolve some
Yes.
funny reporting that happened last year by Fraser Institute and others,
right,
where they were mixing CMA data with city data, and that you can't compare the two because they're two different products.
right, so they are looking at the whole, so that makes a lot more
So
sense.
that's this, I'm just
Okay.
playing for you as well,
Good.
that the summer, in another month or so, the crime report for all of Canada are coming out, and they carried that practice forward. Now, that's going to be reported on CMA basis as
CMA,
well.
oh,
Again, very
okay,
important, because it tends to have CMAs, which are by definition sort of the urban centers that serve larger areas.
yes,
There's daytime, nighttime population.
Right.
People come into the city, and so to some extent, there's
Okay.
policing needs that are created as a result of that.
right, so it takes into account the full population.
So in
in
comparison
here,
to other
okay,
CMAs,
good.
you're talking about like geographies, like similar communities that go on the relationship.
Good, those are positive, I think. Okay, any questions about that? No? Motion to receive and file?
Motion.
Hey, Jennifer and John, second, all in favor? Aye, okay. All right, so now, item 9.7. So this was following our meeting in May, we had an electronic vote. So this is, that we had made the resolution to go ahead and purchase the required fleet. So this is a receive and file.
Yeah.
Okay. And all in favor? Okay. And item 9.8, so this is 9.8. Okay, so the financial report.
Come on.
You're on.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say our projected deficit of 500,000, we avoided that, which is a good news story considering where we were going. As you can see from the report, and these are unaudited because they have not been issued yet from the city, we came in, we were $240,000 roughly over budget, which is about 1.1%. And if you look at a lot of municipal budgets, if you stay within the 1% range, you're usually doing okay, considering everything else being equal. The 1% is sort of the rule of thumb that a lot of places will use. Not saying that our goal was not to be on budget, but I'll talk about a couple of reasons why that did not happen.
Okay.
One of the good news stories for us last year was our revenue surpassed our projection by almost $654,000, which that's a good
That's
story
great.
for us. As we go into 2015, we're not going to sustain that because there were a couple things that happened last year. We were involved in special operations with the RCMP that we recovered a good deal of money from that. That's certainly not going to happen in 2015, but that certainly helped our situation in 2014. As I indicated before in previous reports for 2014, our salaries and wages at the end of the year were over budget by $657,000. And we knew that. We had a wage settlement and we didn't have enough funding in our budget to cover that.
And that was part of the discussion when we had that when we negotiated the agreement, that we knew this was going to happen in the
Exactly.
future. Yeah.
But in saying that, and we said this many times before, is this agreement that we have or negotiated was much less than what we would have seen if we went to arbitration.
Right.
We know that for a fact. So,
Yeah.
so we had to prepare for this additional cost. Overtime, we've spoken overtime at length in the past. At the end of the year, our overtime cost exceeded budget by $339,000. Court and overtime was $253,000. And fringe benefits were over as well because they're directly related
To the contract.
any increase in wages or whatever. One of the things I want to highlight, because I think this is very important, is the job that staff did in trying to implement a freeze on our spending. If you look at this document, our goods and services were under budget by $564,000. A lot of that's not sustainable going into 2015, but we did realize some savings in this building. I think it was over $200,000 that cost us less than what we budgeted in 2014. So that's a good news story for us as well. On the revenue side too, which I didn't really touch upon as well, was when we look at our detention center, which is a cost center that we operate here, is we did get probably $200,000 back from the province to cost share the operational cost down. So that's part of the revenue numbers that I talked about that we received. Now, in saying that,
Was that cost sharing to get it started, or is that an ongoing agreement?
it's the actual operating cost of the facility.
Okay.
They pick up about a third of the cost.
Okay.
And that's an agreement we have in place.
Right,
with them.
okay, so that's, okay.
And that's from the sheriff's department.
Yes.
They pay for their share of using that facility. And in the body of the report, again, I've sort of talked about this generally as far as salaries and wages. I really want to probably go to the conclusion because for us, this is probably the key part, is that we did originally in August, roughly August, I said our projection was 500,000, we'd be over budget. One of the things we realized is there was this compounding effect that happened with the wage settlement from 2013 to 2014. And that obviously impacted our budget. But again, it was a negotiated settlement. And again, when we talk about goods and services, we certainly put a freeze on that. One of the things that, and this is not so much commentary, but one of the things that we're starting to realize is we are at that sort of, do we have enough officers now to maintain our service level? But secondly, are we going to start incurring more overtime? Our numbers going down, and that's certainly a conversation the board is they want to have. But it's important we highlight that because the overtime that we incurred last year, some of that is a result of backfilling those shifts because we don't have the same number in the deputy talked about, decline. And at one point, I think I mentioned, someone asked a question, what would that number look like? And I believe, and this is just my personal view with the reductions, is that we had an infusion, say 12 officers in patrol, bump that back up to what we knew as 25 and not to 21 and 22. That would certainly help us down the road. In saying that, we were fortunate through last year. We did have some retirements and things, but we didn't know hire.
No, I know.
And as we, at some point, we can hit the bare minimum, and I think we're there now.
I think we're there.
And the impact on morale too, can't
Oh my
that
gosh.
if I'm going in and working my shift and I'm always being called to come back in, that is very difficult to measure, but I can't imagine that there's anything positive about that.
Well, and that goes to sick time. So people who are getting burnt out are calling in sick,
Right.
which is also, there's the requirement through the, people can take so much time off through vacation and there's, however many they get time off. But then there's the additional, like that would also be interesting if we can kind of see some of that, like how much sick time is there and how much is that
Or
contributing?
absenteeism.
Yeah, absentee,
Yeah.
right.
We can produce that. I'll try for next.
Because that's a huge symptom of like if we are at that bare minimum, then you're gonna see that number go right up.
So
Like it's,
And we're
yeah,
entering into
Yeah.
a time when people typically
And, yeah.
want to be doing things with their friends and family, and the weather is, God willing, going to get nicer, and
yeah.
So, do we have, this probably isn't, time to be talking about budget, but I'm just wondering if we have a program in place so that if I break my leg, I'm obviously not gonna go on patrol, but is there some place that we put,
We have five people there now.
you have 5 on?
Yeah, we have 5 out on long-term sickness.
We have a very good return to work, practice or procedure that we follow very well. And that's been happening for years now for that reason, is we still think someone can come back and do some meaningful work. So through duty to accommodate, we extend that and we actually work with the employees to get them back much sooner than being at home for a longer period of time. Because if you look at the research, and it's very obvious, anyone that's out of the workforce after 6 months, it's so
Back
difficult to get them back.
Yeah.
So as soon as we know they're going to be out for a period of time, we're calling them saying, what can you do? What can we assist you? So yes, we have that in place and we've been doing it for years now. It's been very successful.
Can we all, I don't know that it's possible, but now that you have the no, or the layoff, or no layoff clause, whatever that was or isn't, is that something that can be looked at, like what's more beneficial? Is there an option to hire for a period of time? Versus, I don't know the
That would
answer to
be, that would be a contract change, because we don't have any, unlike other agencies that can hire people on contract for
Yeah.
a period of time, we don't have that in our contract right now.
Mm.
But again, as we go forward and we look at, you know, what are some of the other ways of doing business, that would be something we would want to, again, have
Yeah.
a conversation about if it's doable.
Right.
But that's a contractual thing that we
Yeah.
have to do.
Okay.
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 If there's any
Anything else
specific
in
questions
here?
on the report, I certainly would try, but we've been talking about this for months now, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I would move the recommendation.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, item 9.9 on page 100. This is, again, okay,
Good
on
news story.
PSCC.
Well, this is a good news story, because just moments ago, I told you, with a lot of work by all staff, not just management, is we were over budget by $240,000. On the flip side, in our 911 center, we were under budget by $308,000. So we basically, the two have combined to give money back to the city, if we can use that terminology, I guess, which is a good news story. But certainly, one of the things that changed in 2014 for us is, with the 911 center, is our revenue increased last year with respect to 911 calls from the
Okay.
province. And we probably, it's probably about $100,000, it was $100,000 roughly, that we received additional revenues from the province in 2014, which obviously, you know, is a good part of this surplus that we're talking about. The other thing is, our staffing last year was better than the previous year as far as hires go. But we did recognize savings in wages by $260,000. As a result of not having our staffing levels where we wanted them, we had to obviously backfill and with overtime. So we were over budget by $196,000. Fringe benefits, because we had savings on the wages, were under budget. And the goods and services for this center is not a big number, but we certainly were about $47,000 under budget there as well. So from the center's perspective, it was a good year in the sense that we didn't use all the money as allocated. But our staffing levels where we want to be is below our optimum level, so we're still working on that now.
Yeah.
And again, by the first of 2016, we hope to be there just through continuous recruitment and so on.
But there was some hiring, right?
There was some hiring, yes. However, what happens is, last year we hired at least 3 people. One long-term operator left and went to another city department. We had one operator that went on maternity leave, so we're seeing an influx of just people coming
Yeah.
and going, and it's uncontrollable. But what we want to do is get the establishment of 20 operators and 4 supervisors,
Yeah.
and then we can look at casuals to help backfill as necessary. But that will make a big difference for us for a number of reasons. There won't be as much overtime if people are working, gives them more time at home and so on. So we're making progress. Again, it's not where we want to be, but I'd rather see us moving ahead than we were a year ago with respect to our budget. Now, as we look ahead to 2015, is the budget will be more in line with the actual figures, because our budget was somewhat reduced in 2015 as far as our request to council. So we won't, I would almost guarantee you're not going to see a surplus of $300,000 in 2015. But it does allow us to offset the I would say overrun, but the expenses that we incurred on the police side.
From there.
Marvin, how far-reaching does this center do the 911 calls?
Well, I'd have to say that, and Glenn, you can help me on this because you're more familiar with the jurisdiction, but we often will get calls coming in from, like, I know in some other jurisdictions when they're centered down, we get the calls here as well.
Yeah,
But usually Sussex,
Yep.
St. Stephen?
Yep, and there's all kinds of contracts in terms of fire, musquash and all that, they're contracted out, and Dave would be able to actually, was involved in that process. So where do we go, 911 center, how far, and
St. Stephen's,
There-
Sussex?
there's-
and
there's-
We
there's-
go from,
Petersville?
no, we go from St. Stephen, Sussex, and yeah, about
Petersville Hill.
Petersville Hill
Petersville.
Yeah, so,
Do we have more capacity than that?
to dispatch more.
Yeah, to take on contracts for other
The
jurisdictions.
technology's there,
Right,
staff.
that's what
No,
we're, yeah.
but what I'm getting at is, if we contracted with Fredericton Moncton, for example, to
Yeah.
do all of their 911, and we
The
would have to
technology
hire
is there to
3
support
people,
that.
and it was gonna cost us $150,000 for those 3 people, and we're gonna make $500,000 by contract, and we have the capacity to do it.
We have the capacity, but you have to remember too, that the government has divided the province in, I think it's 5 areas in their dispatch, 6 areas. So we are only operating within our area.
Can
If
we
we
go
want to go
beyond
to
that?
another area, that would involve negotiations with the province.
But I mean, the province is trying to save $600 million.
they,
Right.
they actually talked about reducing it a bit, but now they are enhancing the center in Fredericton, city police in Fredericton.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
There's an
Okay.
opportunity.
There's
But
an
to answer your
opportunity.
question, the opportunity's there, it's just a matter of getting the right parties together.
Yeah.
Because, every place is sort of standalone, and,
Right, and it doesn't need to be, because the technology is there.
Yeah.
We have a bilingual workforce. We could put on a recruiting drive kind of beyond and more than what we've done, right? If we needed more people to fill the
Yeah,
capacity.
I think that's an initiative we should be looking at.
Yeah,
well, one of the things I know when we did the realignment, when Inspector Parks, looking back to patrol and 911 came under my sort of direction, is only a few weeks ago I attended a provincial meeting, the PSAP meeting, David, that we go to. And there are discussions on what would the perfect world look like in the PSAP world. Would there be 1? Would there be 2? And that's the conversations they're having at the provincial level. And there's a number of things they have to deal with. It's the language, for instance. As much as we don't realize it, there's a certain dialect in French
Yeah.
in other parts of the province that we wouldn't know. So they're working through some of those things. But I would suggest to you that's not something that's going to happen right away. But they are talking about it, and through the government's initiative, as far as cost savings. So
Yeah, I think if we could put a business plan together to show that we could do it cheaper, right? And by contracting St. John to do a much larger part of the province, maybe it's all of southern New Brunswick, Moncton, Fredericton down.
Yeah.
I don't know, but if we could show them that we could save them a few $100,000 or $1 million or whatever it gets to be, and then we're gonna make a few dollars on the side. That's, I think, key, and I think the timing is right, because that's what they're looking
And
for.
increasing employment here.
right.
And increasing employment, at the same time,
Exactly.
you're increasing employment in St. John.
I don't know where we go with that, but I mean, that's just a concept or an idea that I have.
I think the safest approach to take is with this senior committee that sits and represents all the PSAPs.
Yep.
Is that's where the conversations would happen as far as how do we, if the government comes out and says, listen, we want you to go to 3, and then that's when we would say, listen, we can handle the overflow. But it isn't as easy as putting submission and saying we want to do it. There has to be a customer, I guess, and that's really doesn't exist right now, outside of what we do now. Because we would be encroaching upon other, areas, and we couldn't just give a proposal to government and say we want to do this because there'd be other players involved. So I think through that committee, at some point, the government goes that direction. Those will be discussions that will take place, Chancellor shows. But there's political things that go with that too, right?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
definitely.
It's not
So
that
you're a
much.
part of that committee?
Yes.
And how often does that committee meet?
We meet usually twice a year, but I think there's a lot going on now, so there'll be more frequent meetings. And we also have representation from the operation managers in the center as well on the operational
Okay.
issues. So I attended my first meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually really good to go and hear all about what, some of the initiatives. As Inspector said, Fredericton just are building a new center up there, which is state of the art.
then Kodiak has their own J division.
Right,
has their
but-
own and on, right? So,
Because, yeah, in other jurisdictions, this is something where they kind of outsource and look, but I get, we have to, I appreciate kind of the political side of it.
There's a
but-
protocol.
Yeah, and how we do that.
But we certainly could be ready to present something to them
Right.
as the offer, if they offer,
Yeah.
to ask us to offer services.
They've already started the Fredericton facility, I take it.
Oh, it's almost.
It's almost done.
Well, you
Because
know,
it's such a big province that we need a lot of
750,000 people, yeah, I know.
high-tech facilities.
I'm beating that horse.
Good idea, though. Good
Yeah.
idea.
Okay,
So,
good. Well, thank you. Receive and file,
Receive and file.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that is it for our open agenda. So could I get a motion to adjourn our open session? Jennifer?
So move.
John, all in favor? Okay. We are adjourned.